Hey gang, what's up? Tiger Mike here. Wanted to start a series on The Mandalorian, but I feel like we need a little bit more background on Mandalorians before I can dive too deep into all these episodes and all the things that I noticed and all this fun stuff. Um, so, we have two histories of The Mandalorians, the new Disney canon, and then what most would consider legends. However, essentially what the Mandalorians doing and some of the newer season of the Clone Wars, they're reconfirming a lot of this old legacy stuff. So I think it's important to go over, the legacy, and then we'll go over what's currently canon. Because I think you'll see that there's not a lot contradicting the legacy. All right, so essentially, way back in the day, before the Republic, before the Jedi or the Sith, before any of that nonsense, uh, Coruscant, just hanging out, chilling, big natural planet, forests, rivers, oceans, the whole nine yards, it's just a regular old habitable planet. On this planet, there are two species, a human species and a non humanoid species. They're a bipedal species, but they're these interesting, green, lizardy looking things. So essentially, both species were sentient and fighting for dominance of the planet. The non humanoid species were called the Taung, and over the centuries of all this warring with the humans, they developed a warrior lifestyle. And their leader was called Mandalore. Mand apostrophe Alore. Over time, all these wars, they were eventually exiled from Coruscant. This wiped out a lot of them in the process. So there's not a lot of them left. They're exiled out into the galaxy, but they keep this warrior lifestyle of let's go and let's find battles and creatures to tame and all these, and they were very ingenious in terms of war machines and all this. They created giant war droids that they rode into battle. Over time, their species dwindled to a point where there weren't many of them left. And so they decided to take on foundlings from other races that they either conquered, or there were some humans like bounty hunters who did come into and say, hey, I would like to join you. You kind of got it going on. One of these bounty hunters was Cassius Fett. And we'll get into why Cassius Fett is important later. But just for now, know that he was one of the first grown, adult Mandalorians that was human. So the Taung called these groups the Neo-Crusaders. So the Neo-Crusaders were people who adopted the way of the Mandalore, but were not Taung. So the Neo-Crusaders and the Taung went to war against the old Republic. That did not go well because the Jedi Order, while mostly decided to remain out of the conflict, there were a few Jedi Knights who decided to leave and go and fight against the Mandalorians because the Republic Army just didn't have the tactics or ability to withstand the Mandalorian attack. But with these few Jedi that left, there were two leaders, Revan and Malak. They were able to stop the Mandalorian advance and defeat them. So eventually, right after that, the Revan and Malak fell to the dark side, become Sith. All of the Jedi that followed them, for the most part, fell to the dark side and became Sith as well. This is before the Rule of Two, and that's a story for a whole other time. But this is essentially the backstory to Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which is an amazing video game available on Steam, and you should buy it, and you should play it. And then there's also Knights of the Old Republic 2, which continues the saga, and you should buy it, and you should play it. Anyway, that's the prehistory of what we know. That's legacy canon. There's a lot of comics and materials around that time other than Knights of the Old Republic, but basically kind of a multimedia. They're all sort of attached to each other and take on different aspects of the story that's going on, and it's really interesting stuff. But for our immediate purposes, isn't super relevant. So after this big war with the Republic, a lot of Mandalorians would stay nomadic. They would kind of wander around and, find battle and glory and continue their way of life. But they also, had families and raised children and, did the things that are necessary to maintain a society. Eventually, many Mandalorian clans settled on a planet and called it Mandalore. So Mandalore was not a planet just hanging out, and everyone's like, oh yeah, there's Mandalore. It's like, no, we're going to go find a new planet and call it Mandalore, and that's what they did. So over time, a few other planets were settled by Mandalorians, conquered by Mandalorians, and the three most important are Mandalore, Concordan, and Cronist. Are basically the three most important planets that we need to remember. Then there's Concordia, which is a moon of Mandalore that's also important. But basically, so they settled these planets. Originally, they were, wild, lush, and beautiful. Over the course of many, wars and civil wars, the planet Mandalore was decimated and basically went from a very green, lush planet to essentially a giant white desert. So the Mandalorians that lived there created dome cities to live in and be able to get by and survive. But the Mandalorians essentially dwindled themselves down to the point where they were heavily reliant on trade. And that's either through conquest trade or through fair trade. But they got to a point where they needed trade. So at this point, we're kind of crossing over into the legacy era, into the canon era, because during these tumultuous times of up and downs for the Mandalorians and their clans, Clan Vizsla had a child that was force sensitive, and the Jedi came and brought him into the Jedi Order, raised him as a Padawan. He became a Jedi Knight, and when he built his lightsaber, he built the Darksaber, which is what we see Moff Gideon holding as he cuts his way out of his TIE fighter at the end of season 1 of Mandalorian. So the Darksaber was important because this Jedi Knight Vizsla leaves the Order and uses the Darksaber and his abilities to unite the clans and cause a whole bunch of fun, havoc, and good times for the Mandalorians. When he dies, the Jedi come and they take his lightsaber back. So time passes, seasons change, and eventually Clan Vizsla sees that the Republic is falling and is weak. This is the old Republic, remember? And they go to the Jedi Order and they steal back the Darksaber. And then using the Darksaber, Clan Vizsla again unites the Mandalorian clans and all the fun times that come with that. So over time, Clan Vizsla hangs on to the Darksaber. So now we are officially in canon, Disney canon again. And you'll see as we move on, there's not a lot that contradicts the legacy canon that I just went over. So now that we have regular canon going, we have Pre-Vizsla, who in the Clone Wars wants to take over Mandalore, which has become pacifist. So again, Mandalore having to rely more on trade and not being able to fully sustain its population through its own resources. Eventually, after another civil war, they decide to join the Republic. And the leader after the civil war is named Duchess Satine. She is Bo-Katan's sister. And we'll get into Bo-Katan in a little bit. But Duchess Satine becomes a pacifist after this civil war and is very adamantly against the use of violence and essentially everything that makes a Mandalorian. So while, philosophically this might sound all peachy keen, it's really against the Mandalorian way. So Pre-Vizsla, who is the current leader of Clan Vizsla, begins the Death Watch. The Death Watch was a clan of warriors who followed the Mandalorian way and were plotting to take back Mandalore and re-inspire the people to their Mandalorian warrior ways. So through many attempts, Pre Vizsla fails. And eventually Maul comes into the picture and kills Pre Vizsla in single combat through official honorable Mandalorian combat. So he challenges Pre Vizsla for leadership. And so, not wanting to look weak, Pre Vizsla accepts. Obviously a bad call because Maul's terrifyingly more powerful than Pre Vizsla. And so obviously Maul wins and takes the Darksaber for his own. At this point, Death Watch splits because Bo-Katan, who was the second in command of Death Watch, is not about to have a non-Mandalorian leading her group. So she's like, you're not a Mandalorian. Peace out, suckers. Let's go. And takes all of her supporters and ditches. So now we have three kind of we have three parties in Vive control for Mandalore, but realistically there's five, because we have Death Watch under Maul's control, the Mandalorian Resistance under Bo-Katan's control, and then the current Mandalorian government under the Prime Minister's control, whose name I can't remember. It's like Artemis or Atmos or something like that. Then we have the Republic and the Separatists, who are both under control of Palpatine, who is pulling the strings and trying to manipulate so he can get control of Mandalore, because he's very aware of the instability that is inherent with their people because of their way of life. So eventually Maul rules Mandalore for a short time. Palpatine comes in, kicks his ass, imprisons him. Death Watch frees him, gives him back the friggin' Darksaber. So there's a lot of turmoil that goes on Mandalore and around Mandalore and their culture during the Clone Wars. So there's a lot of episodes in the Clone Wars. I suggest you go watch them. But basically, what happens is Maul keeps the Darksaber. That's what's important. Over time, the Empire, Order 66 happens. Empire takes over control of Mandalore because Darth Maul had just been in control for a short period of time. Ahsoka goes and beats him. Then Order 66 happens. So Ahsoka has to escape. Maul has to escape. And that essentially leaves Mandalore with no serious protection. And so after the formation of the Empire, they run in and they take control. But that's not the Purge. It's important to note that when the Empire took over Mandalore, that was not the Purge, because many clans swore fealty to the Empire and signed up to become super commandos with Beskar armor, but under an Imperial look. Mandalore exists for a while like that. It's important to note that Sabine Wren grows up during this time and joins the Empire and starts to help them with some technological weapons that target Beskar armor and kill the wearer without damaging the armor. This is how they were able to collect so much Beskar. Even though this weapon never comes into full production, there is a lot of... my theory is that they do get it back into an operational and produced mode when the Purge happens. So Mandalore exists under Imperial rule for a little while. And then in Star Wars Rebels, Sabine Wren, Kanan Jarrus, and Ezra Bridger encounter Maul, who has the Darksaber. It ends up in Sabine's hands. So, but because it wasn't single combat and because she didn't defeat Maul herself, she didn't really earn the Darksaber in the true Mandalorian sense to be able to claim leadership, nor did she really desire to claim leadership because she was like, that wasn't her style. So eventually, through that story arc, the Darksaber falls to Bo-Katan, who is still around and is still fighting Imperial rule of Mandalore, but, you know, it's pretty friggin' difficult. So with the Darksaber, she's able to lead the Mandalorian clans against the Empire, and that's when the Purge happens. So basically, shortly after the story arc in Star Wars Rebels, which takes place only 1 year or so before the Battle of Yavin in the first Star Wars movie, where the Death Star is destroyed. So this is very, very close to what we're coming up to in movie timeline for the original trilogy. So Bo-Katan, with the Darksaber, unites the clans against the Empire. Moff Gideon comes in, and in my theory, using the technology, which was codenamed the Duchess, is kind of a spite against Duchess Satine. But I think Moff Gideon comes in with that technology and just wipes out all the Mandalorians that are fighting against him, collects all that Beskar armor, which is why they say it's collected in the Purge, which is why the Death Watch would believe Mandalore to be a cursed planet, because they're zealots, and they've been zealots, and so this whole foundling raising group has been separated from a lot of these events. And so they haven't even been kept aware of what's been going on, other than the big news that, oh, the Death Star was blown up. That's interesting. Oh, the rebels are, attacking Endor. That's interesting. Holy shit, the Empire is like falling apart. The Emperor's dead. That's all they're really getting. They don't really have any good word on what's really happening on Mandalore. It's my theory that there are still citizens alive on Mandalore, that they were resubjugated, and, just keep living on in their city domes as basically not much better than any other Imperial planet under Imperial rule that's shown any sort of independent thought. So now we're kind of caught up with the past of the Mandalorians, both canon and legacy. But now in future videos, when I reference things, you'll kind of see how there's not a lot that contradicts that legacy canon. And in fact, many things are confirming it. For example, episode 1 of season 2, his entire storyline on Tatooine is pretty much a story arc quest line in Knights of the Old Republic, where you have to go and kill a crate dragon to get to your real objective. But to kill the crate dragon, you need help, and you need a map to get to that area, so you need to get that map from Tusken Raiders, and you can either do this peacefully or violently. Such is the way that Knights of the Old Republic is set up. You can be a dark side character or a light side character. And you have to kill this crate dragon, and then one of the big deals is there's a pearl inside the crate dragon that's like the most valuable part of it, and you can sell that for a bunch of money. Or it's actually, if you are nice to the Tusken Raiders, you promise it to them. And so it's just a really interesting whole parallel with what happens in season 1 of The Mandalorian, because he has to kill a crate dragon. The Tusken Raiders are interested in the meat. In the game, the meat is poison. That's how you kill the crate dragon, is by poisoning a Brahmin. Not a Brahmin. A Bantha. In the game, you kill the crate dragon by poisoning a Bantha, and so tainting its meat, which kills the crate dragon. Obviously, that wasn't going to work in The Mandalorian, because the crate dragon is more interested in the people than the Banthas. So there are minor differences, but essentially the overall plot of, the character has an objective, but to get that objective needs to kill a crate dragon. And to do that needs help from the Tusken Raiders. So it's really interesting kind of 360 in how that's how you kill a crate dragon. Obviously, they didn't think of the poison in the episode, but it wouldn't have worked anyway. But so this is how The Mandalorian's been confirming legacy canon. And so now we're going to see a lot more coming through for what's going on in The Mandalorian. I think we're going to see a lot more of that legacy canon becoming confirmed as we discover what the Mandalorians are about in their history, even to the point where hopefully we'll relearn about the Taung, who originated the Mandalorian way and were from Coruscant. That would just be like my fanboy dream right there. So anyway, this is a super long video already, But we're going to wrap it up there, gang. I hope you enjoyed learning the history of the Mandalore. There's a lot more information online. There's a lot more information in these legacy materials and newer canon materials that you can look up and watch as well and read. So anyway, if you like this video, like and subscribe to the channel. We'll definitely be doing more of these videos as I move forward. Gonna probably try to catch up to where we are and do a new video every week with each new episode that comes out. So I hope you look forward to it, gang, and we'll see you down the road. This is Tiger Mike, and this is the way.